morning, Earthlings. How you doing today? Welcome to First Contact Radio. Let's jump over to our cosmic weather, see what we have today. Our solar wind is a bit more than it was yesterday. Today we're 391.7. Planetary K index was up to a 2 yesterday, back down to a 0. Looks like we got a 3 possibility in the next 24 hours. Nothing much in the way of the coronal holes. A few of these underneath. I don't know if these are actually edges to a pyramid. They're just, or a triangle. They're just 3 spots, but we do know the triangle is underneath there somewhere. And here we have M-class flares dropped again, down to 10% chance from 15. So nothing much there, and geomagnetic storm activity is down pretty low as well. So pretty quiet day out there. Pretty quiet day indeed. If we go over to our astrology, we see that our moon sign has changed. Actually, the moon sign is the same, excuse me. So we're in Leo. So just like yesterday, we're dealing with fire as the element of the unconscious and the conscious mind. Virgo, which is our sun sign for the month, is Earth. So we've got Earth on the outside, practicality and creative ideas underneath, trying to come through. We're trying to find a way how to practically express these creative ideas in our life. So that's where we're at today energetically. A little more practice working with Earth and fire. The moon phase, we're almost back down to a new moon again. Just a 7% sliver right there. And in our Mayan Oracle, we're at the 4th position, or the 4th tone. 4th tone is called the self-existing tone of form. The star is their kin for today. So today is called the self-existing star, guided by the seed. All part of the serpent wave spell. The phrase for today is, I define, in order to beautify measuring art. I seal the store of elegance with the self-existing tone of form. I am guided by the power of flowering. And again, today is a galactic activation portal day, one of those 10 days that I was telling you about. Today we're at 4th day along the way. And if it's been intense, well, it's par for the course. And on the Gregorian calendar, today is, you can see right here, Thursday, September 13th, 2012. So there you have it. That's our cosmic weather for today. All right. So a lot of things going on in the world as usual. And having been out on the road trip and a lot of food for thought, I look at each day and it's like there's tons of problems. You know there's problems out there. I know there's problems out there. It's not like it's a big secret. Question is, what do we do about the problems? Because we can complain every day about them, but it doesn't do us any good to keep complaining, right? It only does us good to find some sort of solutions. Well, to me, it seems that the problem we have here, certainly in the United States, is a lack of information. There's a lot of smart people out there in the world, but the information getting to them isn't the best information. People turn on their news, the mainstream news, and they get information that is all over the board, and more likely than not is some form of propaganda. So I want to address the issue of propaganda again, because that is what is being thrown at the people all the time. And I believe if the American people knew that they were being used or propagandized by those who are trying to get them to think the way they want them to think, then Americans might choose differently. They might make different choices if they understood the processes going on. And so, in that regard, this piece in propaganda is intended maybe to open some eyes. So here we go.
When I came back to the United States, I decided that if you could use propaganda for war, you could certainly use it for peace. And propaganda got to be a bad word because of the Germans using it. So what I did was to try to find some other words. So we found the word Council on Public Relations.
Bernays returned to New York and set up as a public relations counsel in a small office off Broadway. It was the first time the term had ever been used. Since the end of the 19th century, America had become a mass industrial society, with millions clustered together in the cities. Bernays was determined to find a way to manage and alter the way these new crowds thought and felt. To do this, he turned to the writings of his uncle Sigmund. While in Paris, Bernays had sent his uncle a gift of some Havana cigars. In return, Freud had sent him a copy of his general introduction to psychoanalysis. Bernays read it, and the picture of hidden irrational forces inside human beings fascinated him. This series is about how those in power have used Freud's theories to try and control the dangerous crowd in an age of mass democracy. At the heart of the story is not just Sigmund Freud, but other members of the Freud family. This episode is about Freud's American nephew, Edward Bernays. Bernays is almost completely unknown today, but his influence on the 20th century was nearly as great as his uncle's. Because Bernays was the first person to take Freud's ideas about human beings and use them to manipulate the masses. He showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires. Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses. By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy and thus docile. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today. Bernays set out to experiment with the minds of the popular classes. His most dramatic experiment was to persuade women to smoke. At that time there was a taboo against women smoking, and one of his early clients, George Hill, the president of the American Tobacco Corporation, asked Bernays to find a way of breaking it. A. Brill was one of the first psychoanalysts in America, and for a large fee he told Bernays that cigarettes were a symbol of the penis and of male sexual power. He told Bernays that if he could find a way to connect cigarettes with the idea of challenging male power, then women would smoke, because then they would have their own penises. Every year, New York held an Easter Day parade to which thousands came, and Bernays decided to stage an event there. He persuaded a group of rich debutantes to hide cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays then informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest by lighting up what they called torches of freedom.
A symbol, women, young women, debutantes, smoking a cigarette in public with a phrase that means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom.
Every metaphor and analogy has to come from somewhere. Perhaps they are rare pearls that drop from the pens of an elite corps of bards and scribblers and then are hoarded by a grateful populace. But given their prevalence in language, it seems more likely that they are the natural products of the way everyone's mind works.
And so the next day, this was not just in all of the New York papers, it was across the United States and around the world. And from that point forward, the sale of cigarettes to women began to rise. He had made them socially acceptable with a single symbolic ad.
Eddie Bernays saw the way to sell product was not to sell it to your intellect, that you ought to buy an automobile, but that you will feel better about it if you have this automobile.
What the corporations realized they had to do was transform the way the majority of Americans thought about products. One leading Wall Street banker, Paul Mazur of Lehman Brothers, was clear about what was necessary. We must shift America, he wrote, from a needs to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things even before the old have been entirely consumed. We must shape a new mentality in America. Man's desires must overshadow his needs. In 1939, New York hosted the World's Fair. Edward Bernays was a central advisor. He insisted that the theme be the link between democracy and American business. At the heart of the fair was a giant white dome that Bernays named Democracy. And the central exhibit was a vast working model of America's future, constructed by the General Motors Corporation.
To my father, the World's Fair was an opportunity to keep the status quo, that is, capitalism, in a democracy. It was consumerist, but at the same time, you inferred that in a funny way, democracy and capitalism went together.
The World's Fair was an extraordinary success and captured America's imagination. The vision it portrayed was of a new form of democracy, in which business responded to people's innermost desires in a way politicians could never do. But it was a form of democracy that depended on treating people not as active citizens as Roosevelt did, but as passive consumers. Because this, Bernays believed, was the key to control in a mass democracy.
It's not that the people are in charge, but that the people's desires are in charge. The people are not in charge. The people exercise no decision-making power within this environment. So democracy is reduced from something which assumes an active citizenry to the idea of the public as passive consumers. Oh! Driven primarily by instinctual or unconscious desires, and that if you can in fact trigger those needs and desires, you can get what you want from them.
Oh! There you go. That's how it is. So people have been played for a long time. That's what's going on whenever you turn on the television. You're being propagandized. So the question is your mind able to think past all the propaganda being thrown at it, or you can think for yourself? If you can't, then the challenge is to get on the path where you can think for yourself, because otherwise you're going to have someone else pushing your buttons, and nobody wants that, right?
This is the UFO News with Joshua Poet.
All right, this is the UFO News, and I have 4 good stories for us here today. First one comes from East London. This was over a UK power plant. We've got 3. Goes on to say here that daily UFO sightings daily reports on September 8th, 2012, apparent UFO activity over a British power plant in East London last month. UFO sightings daily is coordinated with Scott C. Waring, who is UFO researcher and author who has become an honorary astronomer through his independent investigative research on anomalies in space and on planets like Mars. Mr. Waring has been affiliated with the United States Air Force at SAS Base. He currently owns an ESL school in Taiwan. Scott Waring documents an eyewitness account of a triangular UFO formation that is consistent with ancient pagan Gnostic warnings of demonic entities referred to as archons. Such alleged demonic entities were also described by the late John Todd. The witness recorded a video across the River Thames as the sun was setting. Pagan Gnostic insight suggests that this UFO sighting was consistent with an apparent archonic formation of 3. In metahistory.org, Dr. John Losh presents ancient pagan Gnostic insights. These insights sought to warn humanity about the archons. The archons are reportedly artificial light forms that are mind parasites. Archons apparently have a tendency to appear in 3s. Furthermore, ancient pagan Gnostic insights suggest that such formations are consistent with an alleged apocalyptical scenario associated with 2012. Archons are the reported extension of the Demurge, which Dr. John Lash also described from pagan Gnostic accounts cited at metahistory.org. The late John Todd once suggested that the operatives of Archons of Earth are able to incite apparent UFOs to appear in the sky. However, such UFOs are not spacecraft, but instead demonic interdimensional entities. Alright, so let's go back up to the picture here. And so what is suggested here is that when we see these type of threes, that this is somewhat symbolic of the formation of the Archons. For more information, metahistory.org is a good place to go. Check that out. Alright, moving right along. Next story here. This is a flying saucer UFO spotted over Harrisburg, Illinois. Bright glowing object, oddly angled flying saucer UFO was caught on video Tuesday hovering in the darkening skies over Harrisburg. The witnesses who caught the unidentified flying object on tape were nearly speechless with surprise at the sight of the mysterious glowing object. On the video itself, which suffers from unusual jitty camera work, it's easy to understand why. The UFO is of the classic flying saucer shape and looks to have a ridge running around its hull. The odd angle is floating at its mystifying. What's conventional aircraft would fly, much less hover in the same way. It's possible that weird object is just a trick of the light, but it would be a rare phenomenon which would produce this uniquely shaped sight. If it is a conventional airplane or even a blimp of some kind, it's not what people, particularly those who witness this, are used to seeing floating in the sky. Alright, let's check it out. Alright, this is over Harrisburg. And the video itself is about 3 minutes, so we're just going to jam for you. There we go.
This is the energy baseline. What else could it be? It's moving.
Alright. See, it's all over the place here. Alright, I'm just gonna. Front is where you can see it the best, so there you go. It's a 3.5-minute video. It's available for you to check out. Moving right along. This is a sighting over Balsamo, Italy. Daytime unidentified flying object recorded by UFO contactee Antonio Urzi over his hometown in Cinisello Balsamo, a commune in the province of Milan. Alright. It's a longer video as well. 7 minutes in length. I'm going to move forward. Alright, so this is only some good sightings here. Alright, it's a 7-minute video, but check it out. Alright, and our last one here comes to us over Sydney, Australia, and it is UFOs filmed with IR technology over Sydney. Take a look at what we have here. Zip forward here. Just describing the cameras. And this is some of what they've captured there. Now this video itself is 7.5 minutes long. Okay, so definitely got some good footage here. Alright, so there you have it. That is our UFO news for today. I'm going to jump away to song. I'll be right back.
What if our government was responsible for some of the greatest crimes against this nation? Would you really want to know? These are big questions, but these questions deserve answers. It's time to demand the truth.
People shouldn't be afraid of their governments.
wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Patriots arise. It's time to demand the truth.
All right, continuing on. Next story here. This seems to be a little victory of sorts against the TSA. Congress smacks down TSA. This comes to us from Steve Watson over at InfoWars. It orders agency to reduce pat-downs, use private security screeners, and address scanner health concerns. A new House report has slammed the Transportation Security Administration for failing to meet taxpayers' expectations. The report, prepared by the House Committee on Homeland Security, says that the TSA must become leaner, smarter organization, and concedes that the agency's insensitivity and obsessing with defending unpopular airport screening procedures is impeding security. The report characterizes the TSA as a bloated bureaucracy that is bogged down in promoting policies that do not match current threat levels. The agency has gone down a troubling path of overspending, limiting private sector engagement, and failing to sufficiently protect passenger privacy, said Transportation Security Subcommittee leader Mike Rogers at yesterday's hearing. 11 years after 9/11, American people expect to see tangible progress in transportation security, with effective operations that respect both their privacy and their wallets, the committee report notes. The private sector is best suited to this challenge, not the federal government. The report also noted that the TSA has failed to make it clear why it has switched to a policy of invasive enhanced pat-downs or what specific threat the procedure addresses. Pat-downs have hit a nerve with general public, and the TSA has failed to adequately explain why it continues to use this procedure 2 years after the initial rollout, the committee said. Recommending a reduction in pat-downs, the report also slammed the TSA for taking a whole year to exclude children from the enhanced procedure after it was introduced in October 2010. Turning to radiation-firing body scanners, the subcommittee recommends that the TSA sponsor an independent analysis of the health risks of body scanners and install private filters on all devices. The report cites that the decision in Epic versus DHS, pointing out the DHS has failed to abide by the ruling a federal appeal court to act promptly to receive public comments on the deployment of scanners. The report also questioned why the TSA has grown exponentially in size when the amount of travelers has decreased. A private sector entity is facing of shrinking consumers base usually must downsize, the committee said. TSA, by contrast, has continually grown its ranks despite fewer travelers. Continue on, we're almost done. Jeff Freeman, Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. Travel Association, a Washington-based trade group for tourism agencies and providers, told the committee that TSA's budget has increased 68% from 2004 to 2011, while the number of passengers has not significantly changed. The real threat of terrorism, the economic consequences of inefficient screening, and increase in screening costs add up to create one of the biggest problems facing the travel industry today, Freeman said, adding that a 2010 survey found that travelers would take 2 or 3 more flights per year if the hassles in security screening were reduced. Here is the bottom line. It is time to reform TSA, Representative Rogers concluded. In fact, it's been a long time coming. Well, there's a victory. That is a good victory right there. So let's see how this turns out, because, yeah, it's been a long time coming, as he says. So I wanted to get that whole report to you because that one's important. Now, we know what's going on overseas. We've heard about the ambassador to Libya that was assassinated or killed. They don't want to use the word assassinated yet, but there are those who are already on the case for some sort of covert operation that took place, possibly a false flag, and how this was done. Obviously, there are problems that are associated with this, and obviously this is pushing and beating the drums again for war and attack. So here's one of them. Libya attack brings challenges for U.S. Islamist militants armed with anti-aircraft weapons and rocket-propelled grenades stormed a lightly defended United States diplomatic mission in Benghazi, Libya, late Tuesday, killing the American ambassador and 3 members of his staff and raising questions about the radicalization of countries swept up in the Arab Spring. The ambassador, J. Christopher Serens, was missing almost immediately after the start of an intense 4-hour firefight for control of the mission, and his body was not located until Wednesday morning at dawn when he was found dead at Benghazi Hospital. American and Libyan officials said it was the first time since 1979 that an American ambassador had died in a violent assault. Americans and European officials said that while many details about the attack remain unclear, the assailants seemed organized, well-trained, heavily armed, and then appeared to have at least some level of advanced planning. But the officials cautioned that it was too soon to tell whether the attack was related to the anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Well, what do you think? For those who are paying attention and those who have read previous reports and postings and forums and all kind of information about the possibility of a false flag on 9/11, and then for something like this to happen, well, bells go off. Now here we go. We got Obama. This is unbelievable, unless of course you understand the story of Barack Hussein Obama and his relationship to his alter ego, Barry Soetoro, and how he is not from America. Then this makes sense. But for all of those who don't quite understand that, you have to put yourself in their shoes. Unbelievable. Obama defends Islam in press conference, then boards plane for Las Vegas. Muslim terror attack will not stop campaigning in Las Vegas. Along with the usual boilerplate blather about working with the Libyan government to bring killers to justice, which no one believes, Obama today in a White House press conference at 10:35 a.m. Eastern Standard Time reconfirmed their official position that the U.S. deplores any intentional effort to denigrate the religious beliefs of others, referring to the anti-Islam movie that was made by a California filmmaker, 3 Americans dead, and the man sympathize, and his main sympathies are for the offended Muslims. Watching Obama talk just now in his cold, emotionless, robotic way about the just happened cold-blooded murder of 2 U.S. Marines and U.S. Ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens, makes you know deep down in your soul that Barack Hussein Obama is against America. There was no talk of American retaliation, no talk of sending in troops, and there was nothing. Ambassador Chris Stevens and the 2 Marines who were killed yesterday died in vain. Well, look, it's unfortunate, but this is something that we already know, because we know Obama is not from here. We know Obama's record is sketchy, and that the last record we have of him goes back to Indonesia, where he claimed to be a Muslim. So again, none of this surprises those who are paying attention. This news is for those who aren't. Here we go. The National Defense Authorization Act. Yes, you may know what it is, but again, strange as it may seem, there are many who do not know what this bill is. And for proof of that, just ask. Ask others that you talk to during the day about the National Defense Authorization Act. Ask them if they know what it is. You'll be surprised at the responses you get. But back in January, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges sued President Obama in the recently passed National Defense Authorization Act, specifically challenging the legality of the authorization for the use of military force or the provision that authorizes military detention for people deemed to have substantially supported al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces. Hedges called the president's action allowing indefinite detention, which was signed into law with little opposition from either party, unforgivable, unconstitutional, and exceedingly dangerous. He attacked point blank the civil rights farce that is the never-ending war on terror conducted by both parties, targeting whom exactly is unclear, but certainly attaining ever more intense retaliation from foreigners, such as the furious attacks against the U.S. consulates in Egypt and Libya. He asked, why do U.S. citizens now need to be specifically singled out for the military detention and denial of due process, when under the 2001 authorization for use of military force, the president can apparently find the legal cover to serve as judge, jury, and executioner to assassinate U.S. citizens. A few months later, in May, U.S. District Judge Catherine Forrest ruled in favor of a temporary injunction blocking the enforcement of the authorization for military detention. Today, the war against the true totalitarian terror won a decisive battle when a 112 opinion when in a 112 opinion, Judge Forrest turned the temporary injunction following an appeal by the totalitarian government from August 6th into a permanent one. The permanent injunction prevents the United States government from enforcing a portion of Section 1021 of the National Defense Authorization Act's Homeland Battlefield provision. The option stems from the January lawsuit filed by former New York Times war correspondent and Pulitzer Prize winner Chris Hedges and others. The plaintiffs said they had no assurance that their writing and advocacy activities would not fall under scope of their provision. Government attorneys argued that the executive branch is entitled to latitude when it comes to cases of national security, and that the law is neither too broad nor too vague. The court does not disagree with the principle that the president has primacy in foreign affairs, the judge says, but that she was not convinced by the government's arguments. The government has not stated that such conduct, which by analogy covers any writing, journalistic, and associational activities that involve Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or whoever is deemed associated forces, does not fall within 1021. What is ironic is that this is the ongoing absolute farce that is the theatrical presidential debate. There hasn't been one word uttered discussing precisely the kind of creepy totalitarian control and Orwellian loss of constitutional rights that the bi-party-supported NDAA would have demanded out of the U.S. Republic. This goes on, but it's good. It's good to see that the judge is paying attention, because many Americans aren't, as we know. All right, let's see here. Next up, this is also a good story here. President of Italy, Italian Supreme Court calls for international criminal investigation into 9/11 attacks. You see, the lies eventually come out. Lies can't stay hidden forever, especially when there are so many eyeballs looking at them. This is from Madison Rupert at the Intel Hub. President of the Italian Supreme Court, Fernando Impasamato, has reportedly called for a criminal investigation into the tragic attacks on September 11, 2001, and even went so far as to draw connections between historical false flag incidents, such as those organized by the CIA in Italy as part of Operation Gladio, which some claim has reared its ugly head once more. It is quite vitriolic letter published by the Journal of 9/11 Studies. Impasano pulls no punches, opening the letter with the searing statement: the 9/11 attacks were a global state terror operation permitted by the administration of the United States of America, which had foreknowledge of the operation, yet remained intentionally unresponsive in order to make the war against Afghanistan and Iraq. To put it briefly, the 9/11 events were an instance of the strategy of tension enacted by the political and economic powers in the USA to seek advantages for the oil and arms industries, wrote Impasamato. Impasamato is no stranger to high-profile cases, having served on the Anti-Mafia Commission during 3 different administrations, investigating the assassination of Italian Prime Minister Aldo Moro, along with the attempted assassination of Pope John Paul II. In calling the 9/11 attacks an instance of strategy of tension, or strategia della tensione, Impasamato is linking them to the decades of brutal violence carried out by the Western intelligence agencies and their agents throughout the Mediterranean. This is no minor accusation, evidenced by the quite powerful statements made condemning Gladio contained in the European Parliament resolution on Gladio, which passed November 22nd, 1990. So, America government isn't going to do the job. International government seems like it's going to help out with the process, and it's good. It's good to see that there are others that are stepping up and helping. We'll see where this goes. All right. Now we have something from the Dalai Lama. This was a posting he made, and this is a bit telling. Dalai Lama tells his Facebook friends that religion is no longer adequate. This past Monday, people who have the Dalai Lama as a Facebook friend found this little gem in their newsfeed. All the world's major religions, with their emphasis on love, compassion, patience, tolerance, and forgiveness, can and do promote inner values. But the reality of the world today is that the grounding ethics in religion is no longer adequate. This is why I am increasingly convinced that the time has come to find a way of thinking about spirituality and ethics beyond religion altogether. So, the article goes on to say the Dalai Lama's advice sounds startlingly familiar, one that echoes the sentiment put forth by outspoken atheist Sam Harris, who argues that science can answer moral questions. The Dalai Lama is no stranger to scientific discourse and has developed a great fascination with neuroscience in particular. It is very possible, therefore, that his thinking has aligned with Harris. Well, maybe, but maybe he's also just kind of, as he says, let's look for something beyond. So I think this is something definitely to contemplate, because we live in a world where we know that religion is all out of whack, don't we? We have one religious group fighting another religious group, fighting another religious group, fighting another religious group, and they all say that they're about love. They all say that they have this message of love that they're presenting to the world, and they have to kill off the other ones that don't believe the same thing, or something to that effect. One thing about all the religions, or the majority of them are out there, they talk about forgiveness, and this seems to be an overlooked facet. Well, what we need to do is we need to separate religion and spirituality, because they are different things. Religion, let's say spirituality, is the spirit that is in things. When you are tuning into your spirit, you're tuning into your own spirituality. However, when you go to a building, an organized religion, you're going to something that is more organized to help you think about what it is you're doing. But eventually religion can be very strict, and you only think about the specific things they think about, and outside of that, there's sometimes no room for that kind of contemplation. So then religion becomes very strict. It doesn't really allow the mind to go where it may need to go to really understand the spirit. Religion has caused a lot of problems, whereas spirituality allows the problems to be addressed and resolved, because it's looking past the boundaries that religions do set up. And that is a problem. These are good questions, because we do have all these religions, and there's a lot of people that go to these religions, and it's very good for them. People learn, people grow in their faith, and then they learn to expand beyond that level to the next level. We need to understand where religion is good, and we need to understand where religion needs to be evolved from, my personal opinion. And I think that what he is saying is very important for us to contemplate. Now, continuing on, we're going to jump into the next phase here, which is the reading of the book. So yesterday I read 6 of these. Today I'm going to read 6 more. And every day I give a little bit of a few more of these. Set you up here. Okay. So, continuing on. Warrior of the Light. The warrior of the light sometimes fights with those he loves. The man who defends his friends is never overwhelmed by the storms of life. He is strong enough to come through difficulties and carry on. He does, however, often face challenges from those he is trying to teach the art of the sword. His disciples provoke him into fighting with them, and the warrior demonstrates his abilities. With just a few blows, he disarms his students, and harmony returns to the place where they meet. Why bother do that when you are so much better than they are, asks the traveler. Because in challenging me, what they really want me to do is talk to me. And that is my way of keeping the dialogue open, replies the warrior. Before embarking on an important battle, a warrior of the light asks himself, how far have I developed my abilities? He knows that he has learned something with every battle he has fought, but many of those lessons have caused him unnecessary suffering. More than once he has wasted his time fighting for a lie, and he has suffered for people who did not deserve his love. Victors never make the same mistake twice. That is why the warrior only risks his heart for something worthwhile. A warrior of the light respects the main teaching of the I Ching. To persevere is favorable. He knows that perseverance is not the same thing as insistence. There are times when battles go on longer than necessary, draining him of strength and enthusiasm. At such moments, the warrior thinks a prolonged war finally destroys the victors too. Then he withdraws his forces from the battlefield and allows himself a respite. He perseveres in his desire, but he knows he must wait for the best moment to attack. A warrior always returns to the fray. He never does so out of stubbornness, but because he has noticed a change in the weather. A warrior of the light knows that certain moments repeat themselves. He often finds himself faced by the same problems and situations, and seeing those difficult situations return, he grows depressed, thinking he is incapable of making any progress in life. "I've been through all of this before," he says to his heart. "Yes, you have been through all of this before," replies his heart, "but you have never been beyond it." Then the warrior realizes that these repeated experiences have but one aim: to teach him what he does not want to learn. A warrior of the light is never predictable. He might dance down the street on the way to work, gaze into the eyes of a complete stranger, and speak of love at first sight or defend an apparently absurd idea. Warriors of the light allow themselves days like these. He is not afraid to weep over ancient sorrows or feel joy at new discoveries. When he feels that the moments have arrived, he drops everything and goes off on some long dreamed of adventure. When he realizes that he can do no more, he abandons the fight, but never blames himself for having committed a few unexpected acts of folly. A warrior does not spend his days trying to play the role that others have chosen for him. Warriors of the light always have a certain gleam in their eyes. They are of this world. They are part of the lives of other people, and they set out their journey with no saddlebags and no sandals. They are often cowardly. They do not always make the right decisions. They suffer over the most trivial things. They have mean thoughts and sometimes believe they are incapable of growing. They frequently deem themselves unworthy of any blessing or miracle. They are not always quite sure of what they are doing here. They spend many sleepless nights believing that their lives have no meaning. That is why they are warriors of the light. Because they make mistakes, because they ask themselves questions, because they are looking for a reason, they are sure to find it. So take a deep breath and relax. Contemplate all of these different ideas, all of these different qualities and thoughts that make up the warrior of the light. And recognize that you are a warrior of the light. Get in touch with all of the qualities within you, your strengths, as well as your weaknesses. Allow the heart chakra to send out love all around the planet. Love and encouragement to all the other warriors of the light. Let's take a moment to visualize that future moment in December 21st, 2012. Let's imagine that runway of light before us, zipping forward into the future, putting ourselves there, filling that moment with light so that when all arrive, light is already prepared. And from this moment, back in this moment where we are, let us just think a positive thought for everyone in the world. And with that, bring our energy and attention back to the present moment on the count of 3. 3, coming back to the present moment filled with confidence. 2, coming back to the present moment filled with faith. And 1, coming back to the present moment happy, healthy, and whole. Happy, healthy, and whole. All right, there you have it. That's the end of our show for today. Thank you for being here. I will be back tomorrow with more news information and, of course, continuing to read on with The Warrior of the Light. I hope you're enjoying the book. I find these passages very insightful, so I thought I'd pass them along, and I hope you find them to be as insightful as well. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace. I'm out of here.